Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining in on our call. My name is Patrick Grant, and I am a fifth year doctoral candidate at LaSalle University, pursuing a PsyD in clinical psychology.
And I'm Kelley Durham. I'm a fourth year doctoral student in clinical psychology at Drexel University.
And today we will be providing you some techniques on just managing stress and anxiety around this COVID-19 pandemic, specifically providing you techniques on creating meaning and accessing spirituality during the crisis.
We also want to give a shout out to Thomas Jefferson University Hospital, Jefferson Center City Clinic for Behavioral Medicine, and our supervisor, Dr. Virginia O'Hare, for making this possible.
And thank you, essential staff, for showing up in healthcare settings and still providing care during this time of uncertainty. Now, just to touch on our learning objectives once more, we'll be using this talk today to assist healthcare providers in engaging techniques to manage stress and anxiety during the pandemic.
So one technique that is a powerful tool to combat anxiety is mindfulness. Mindfulness can be hard to define, but Marsha Linehan, who is the creator of Dialectical Behavior Therapy, defines mindfulness as intentionally living with awareness in the present moment without judging or rejecting the moment, and without attachment to the moment. So living in the present moment in this way can help to reduce suffering and can help us to accept reality as it is, even when that reality is painful. Two ways to practice mindfulness that we're going to talk a little more in depth about today are creating meaning and accessing spirituality. So life can be worth living even when it contains pain. And finding or creating meaning out of our suffering can help us in a crisis. It's one way that we can try to improve the moment and survive the crisis without making it worse. Viktor Frankl is an author who wrote about surviving Nazi concentration camps. And his writings were based on the premise that people need to find or create meaning in order to survive great suffering. And in his words, those who have a why to live can bear with almost any how. So I don't know what your reaction to hearing this is, but I think sometimes if we're told to create meaning out of suffering or search for a silver lining or make lemonade out of lemons, we can have a negative reaction to those kinds of cliche phrases. And that advice can feel invalidating of the difficulties that we're experiencing. And the key here is not to pretend like the lemon was actually lemonade all along. In fact, it's really difficult to turn something very painful into something valuable or positive. And pretending like the lemonade was always a lemon is invalidating and really oversimplifies that process. At the same time, engaging in this process can be a powerful way to cope. So I would encourage you to think about times when you have been able to make lemonade out of a lemon. Think about difficulties that you've faced that you've learned from, or that have caused you to grow, or that have influenced you in some kind of positive way. When we think about creating meaning during this COVID-19 pandemic, a few ideas came to mind as ways that you might create that meaning. One might be tapping into the purpose of your work. So why is it that you do what you do? Do you follow any kind of professional code or ethical code that guides you and your work? Or maybe it's simply just your desire to help other people. Those can be ways to create meaning during this time. think it can also be helpful to really recognize the importance of the sacrifices that you are making for other people, and to recognize the value of that and to take pride in that. It also might help to try to seek inspiration from the sacrifices of other people, both in the past and presently. So that might be, someone famous or someone you don't know, like Viktor Frankl, or it might be somebody who is even in your family or a friend, who has been able to make it through a difficult time or has sacrificed a lot for other people. We can look to how our local, national, and worldwide communities are really pulling together and working together in this time, and derive some source of comfort or meaning from that process. And this might also be a time to reflect on what's really most important in our lives. What are your values? Especially as we are losing access to many of the things that we take for granted, like being able to get together with friends and family, or go to our favorite restaurants or the gym, or maybe the sense of normalcy that we had prior to this time. So those are some suggestions for ways that you might create meaning during the pandemic. But I really encourage you to think about how you might personalize this to you and your own values and experience of this crisis.
Now, creating meaning is a great way to stay with the moment, right? A great way to be mindful. And just to kind of reiterate the definition of mindfulness, it is staying with the present moment, without judgment, without trying to change the moment, so exert force on the moment, and without becoming overly attached to the moment, where you make meaning that is super permanent, right? Meaning making is kind of a process that in which you apply temporary meaning to a situation, right? So mindfulness, another way to kind of deal with the stress and anxiety of this current time is to engage in mindfulness from a spiritual perspective. Now, some people may have some hesitations or reservations around engaging in spiritual practice, especially if they have their own kind of like rigid religious views or spiritual views. But I just wanted to start off by kind of providing two definitions separating spirituality from religion. So spirituality is kind of this foundational belief that there is something bigger than yourself out there. And religion is kind of an organized way of building a relationship with that bigger something. Spiritual practice looks very different from person to person. I have my own spiritual practice. Kelley, I'm sure you have your own. The peers that we have their own. But in everyone's individual spiritual practice, once you kind of like go through with a fine tooth comb through it, we see that there's some overlap between each of our spiritual practices. Some people may want to talk to the divine. Some people want to spend time in silence, especially in moments of crisis. And during moments of crisis, some people want to reach out to others or even balance karma by doing a good deed. But whatever your spiritual practice is, there is some overlap with someone else's. So we can see other spiritual practices as valuable and also take away the things that will apply to us. So it's very important and necessary for you to get what you need in any spiritual practice. Yeah. Now, when we talk about mindfulness from a spiritual perspective, again, this process of um, experiencing a situation without judgment, without attachment, and without trying to change the situation, we are really engaging in the practice of letting go of attachments. Yeah. And when we talk about this, so from day to day, we have these expectations of how our life should go. We have these day to day rigid expectations of, okay, I'm going to wake up. I'm going to go to work. I may go to school. Gonna go to the gym. Gonna hang out with friends. Gonna eat dinner. Gonna go to bed. And gonna repeat the next day until the week is done. But when faced with a crisis, that rigid plan completely gets disrupted. And sometimes that disruption of plan hijacks our emotion to the point where we can't function effectively, or we feel like we've kind of reached the end of the world in a sense. Yeah. So, being mindful from a spiritual perspective, that process of letting go of attachments allows us to experience reality as it is, to experience kind of our limits in the situations that we're experiencing. And not only allows us to experience it fully, but allows us to accept reality for what it is. So many times when we have kind of like these rigid routines, whenever there's a change in our routine, we don't want to accept that change and we want to actually change that change. But by engaging in mindfulness from a spiritual perspective, we're experiencing the change and we're also accepting it for what it is. So, for essential staff right now, that may mean having to leave quarantine and leave your loved ones, leave your family members, or even leave your home if you're a single person, and go give care in a healthcare setting, potentially opening yourself up to a virus that's out there, right? It could be potentially coming back to your family members and putting them at risk, right? That's the reality of the situation. For those of us who are quarantined, it may mean not being able to hang out with loved ones. It may mean disruption of finances. It may mean um, not being able to go to work, yeah, and do your daily job that you're used to doing, right? It's a tough reality to experience, it's a tough reality to accept, but engaging in mindfulness from a spiritual perspective is that active process and that active practice of experiencing reality and accepting it for what it is. Once you do those two things, then you participate with the reality with wisdom. And we define wisdom as a combination of your gut feeling and your logic. Yeah. And the reason why you combine those two things is because we never want to destroy or ignore or put a lid on top of how we're feeling in the moment. The fact of the matter is, when you fully open yourself up to experiencing reality and accepting reality, it can be kind of scary. There can be some worry that arises in you. There can be some discomfort. There can be um, so apprehension towards going out and doing the duties that you have to do from day to day, right? But we still have to participate with that wisdom. If we know we're in a reality as healthcare workers where we have to go out into the field and continue to do work in this pandemic, that's where we pair things with logic, right? And when we talk about logic, we're really talking about engaging flexibly. So I mentioned before this pandemic, we had these rigid routines of maybe get up, go to work, go back home, done, right? But now this pandemic has really disrupted that routine. It has disrupted that rigidity. So now we have to think a little bit more flexibly. Yeah, I still have to participate in going to work, but how can I collaborate with my supervisor? How can I collaborate with my peers to create the safest environment in the midst of a pandemic? When I'm coming back home from work, how can I collaborate with my family members or even interact with my living space in a way that still keeps me in kind of like the most effective, keep me at the most effective level of navigation? Yeah. So being fully mindful from a spiritual perspective is letting go of those rigid attachments that we're used to, experiencing reality as it is, accepting reality as it is, participating wisely, and engaging flexibility. And being mindful from a spiritual perspective will really help us navigate life and navigate this crisis in the most effective way. A second thing that mindfulness does from a spiritual perspective is it really battles that disconnectedness. It really allows us to connect to others. In this time of mandated quarantine, in this time of only being able to interact with others if we are essential staff workers, it kind of feels a little isolating. Right? I've heard a lot of people say, even if they identify as being introverted, that they feel intense isolation during this time. But when we look at it from a mindfulness perspective, that feeling of isolation is a consequence of either being over attached to the situation change that this crisis has caused or judging the situation change that this crisis has caused, right? And a way to kind of address that isolation is to really let go of that over attachment and to let go of that judgment, right? Another way to battle the disconnectedness and to feel more connected is to look at life kind of from a physics standpoint. Some of us are sitting down, some of us are standing. We are connected to surfaces. These surfaces are connected to the earth. The earth is connected to other surfaces that are connected to other people. So no matter how hard we try, as long as we are living, breathing human beings, we are somehow connected to others in this world. Right? So that's from a spiritual standpoint. To make it a little bit more concrete, we can still stay connected even if we are isolated and quarantined. If we have phone capabilities or if we have internet access, there are ways that we can still engage with our loved ones. There are ways we can still engage with our family, our friends. Yeah. And even if we don't have the access to those resources, we have thoughts that we can hold on to, thoughts of past time shared with family, thoughts of past time shared with friends, which kind of build that connectedness again. And as we utilize mindfulness from a spiritual perspective to battle that disconnectedness, to battle that isolation, we also create space to think more flexibly and increase love and compassion for ourselves and others. So noticing that we are all connected, we know that other people are also dealing with this pandemic. They're also suffering financially. They also have to report to healthcare settings to work as essential staff. People are sick and possibly dying. People have loved ones who are suffering, right? We're not in this situation by ourselves. So that gives us space to kind of connect with others from a place of love and compassion. Now, you may say, okay, I got you on the mindfulness thing. I'm going to be mindful from a spiritual perspective to allow me to be more effective in my job or to allow me to connect and have compassion for others. Yeah. That said, I'm still afraid. My body is so full of anxiety. I'm tense. I still can't focus, right? So, Patrick, Kelley, what do I do? Well, we decided to give you two mindfulness practices that will assist in helping your body relax so that you can focus on mentally being mindful in whatever situation that you're in so that you can function most effectively, right? The first of these is diaphragmatic breathing. Now, the way to engage in diaphragmatic breathing is to either lie on your back or I even do it when I'm in a chair, so you can be sitting as well. You have your knees bent. If you're in a chair, your knees are probably already bent. Put a hand on your chest and a hand on your stomach. And what you're going to do is breathe in through your nose and allow your stomach to inflate, right? Your hand is on your stomach, so it should feel that inflation. And then you want to exhale through your mouth, kind of like you're exhaling through a straw. And as you're doing that, you want to allow the muscles of your stomach to tense and tighten as you exhale. You want to do this for about 5 to 10 minutes, for about 3 to 4 times per day if possible. And the thought behind that is you're, again, allowing your body to relax so that your mind will also kind of approach this novel, uncertain situation from a relaxed standpoint so that you can work most effectively and engage in other forms of mindfulness.
Another technique you can use is called progressive muscle relaxation. And with this technique, you're going to pair um, tensing your muscles with your breathing. So again, you want to get into a comfortable position. You can either be sitting or lying down. And then you're going to pick a muscle group to tense. So let's say, something simple to start with is, your fists and your forearms. So you're going to make fists and tense your arm muscles as tightly as you can for about 5 seconds or so, and then relax the muscles. And you want to pair this with your breathing. So while you're tensing your muscles, you're going to breathe in. And then when you relax the muscles, you're going to breathe out. You can work your way through your body, tensing different muscle groups. So maybe you move up your arms, down your torso into your legs, or maybe you go the other way around, starting with your legs and working up. But try to notice that contrast between the tensed state and the relaxed state as you exhale. Once you have practiced this with smaller groups of muscles, you can work towards doing a quick version where you're actually going to be tensing all of your muscle groups at once and then relaxing them simultaneously.
All right, and we just wanted to provide you all with some additional resources, specifically the top three. We have Insight Timer for those who have phone access. Insight Timer is a free app in which you can engage in mindful meditative practices. Positive Psychology has a resource that includes progressive muscle relaxation, as well as diaphragmatic breathing and other techniques to manage stress and anxiety during this time. And then the third bullet, in 2013, the National Wellness Conference created a document to help individuals kind of curate their own spiritual practice, spiritual mindful practice. And so we thought those were pretty awesome resources, as well as resources provided by Jefferson from the VA, SAMHSA, NAMI.
Also, as we've been trying to emphasize throughout this presentation, you are not alone, and there is always someone available for you to talk to. You can reach out to the NAMI Philly Warm line. You'll see that on the right side of the screen. You can also always reach out to the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. Visit their website, suicidepreventionlifeline.org, or even text them. And of course, as you probably know, if you're ever in an emergency situation, you can dial 911.
And again, thank you to Jefferson Center City Clinic for Behavioral Medicine, the Department of Psychiatry and Human Behavior, as well as Dr. O'Hare. Again, my name is Patrick Grant.
And I'm Kelley Durham.
And thank you guys so very much.